You know, one of the most common things I see in therapy, and maybe you've seen this too, either as a therapist or as someone in therapy, is the confusion between the inner child and the inner critic, and what we might call the developing inner nurturing parent or inner coach. These are three separate but integrated parts of the psyche we all carry, and they show up in so many of our inner struggles. But when we don't recognize who's speaking and who's feeling, we can get stuck in circular loops of confusion that don't actually lead to healing. We end up in an impasse of stuckness, a kind of Groundhog Day. Let's start with the inner child. This is the part of you that feels deeply, emotionally, and often without the kind of filters or defenses we develop as adults. The inner child isn't just some symbolic idea, it's a real felt experience inside our psyche. It carries our vulnerability, our unmet needs, our early attachment wounds. And when we feel scared, lonely, ashamed, or abandoned, chances are it's the inner child feeling those things. And here's the crucial part that often gets missed. The inner child feels. It doesn't judge. It doesn't say, I'm not good enough. It says, I'm scared, or I feel sad, or I don't understand why no one else is here. The judgment that comes from somewhere else. And that somewhere else is the inner critic. The inner critic is not always emotional. It's largely analytical. It's harsh. It sounds emotional and perhaps angry when it says things like, you're so stupid, or what's wrong with you? But it's actually delivering verdicts, not feelings. It's like an internal authority figure that developed early in life, usually in response to the kinds of criticism or expectations you were exposed to as a child. It might be the voice of a parent, a teacher, your culture, or even a peer group. And its job, believe it or not, is to protect you. Now, I know that sounds strange. How can a voice that's so mean be trying to protect you? Well, the critic's logic goes something like this. If I can keep you in line, if I can keep you striving and compliant and self-monitoring, then maybe you won't be rejected. Maybe you'll be safe. So it lashes out, not because it's cruel for cruelty's sake, but because it believes its vigilance is essential to your survival. But here's the cost. And this is the piece that often gets overlooked. When the critic lashes out, the person who feels the impact isn't the critic, it's your inner child. So the critic says, you're not good enough, and the inner child immediately internalizes that as shame. The critic doesn't feel ashamed, the child does. The inner critic and inner child are in a codependent relationship. And for this reason, you cannot heal one without the other. You must not just focus on just one of these psychic entities. These are psychic entities that must be separated and externalized out of the psyche where they can heal. But only with the help of a developing, nurturing parent. And this is where so many people, including therapists, get stuck. We confuse the voice that's doing the judging with the part that's being hurt by the judgment. A client may say, I feel ashamed of myself, and the therapist might assume they're hearing the critic. But no, what they're really hearing is the inner child, reeling from the blow of the critic's words. And if we don't recognize that, we risk directing compassion to the wrong place. Or we might try to reason with the critic or even empathize with it without first protecting our inner child. Which brings us to the third voice, and in many ways the most important one, the inner nurturing parent or inner coach. Now, this part of us doesn't come pre-installed. For many people, especially those who grew up without consistent care or attunement, the inner nurturing parent has to be developed consciously, sometimes for the first time in adulthood. It's the part of us that learns to step in and say, that's not okay, when the critic starts up. And it's also the part that turns to the inner child and says, I see you, I'm here, you're safe now. So in practice, what does this look like? Well, let's say the inner critic says, you're a failure, you never get this right. The inner child immediately feels that as shame. maybe fear, maybe a sense of overwhelm. In that moment, the nurturing parent role is twofold. First, it has to set a boundary with the critic, not with hostility, but with firmness. Something like, I'm not going to let you talk to me like that. That's not helping. That's the protective function. And then it has to comfort your inner child. Maybe saying, you're trying your best. You don't deserve to be spoken to that way. You are loved and cared for. This isn't just about affirmations, although they can help. It's about being emotionally present in a way that the inner child never had before. But if we confuse these voices, if we treat the critic like a hurt part, or we ask the child to protect itself, or we expect the nurturing parent to just silence everything without listening, the system breaks down. The child stays unprotected, the critic gets louder, and the nurturing parent never quite finds its authority. The goal here is not to destroy the critic. In fact, over time, the critical voice can be transformed. It might become more discerning, more attuned, more protective in a healthier way. But that transformation only happens after the nurturing parent takes charge, after the child is safe, and after the inner critic is boundaried. It's often the case at the beginning of therapy that the therapist takes on the role of a nurturing parent, as well as modeling what a nurturing parent looks and feels like. So whether you're in therapy or guiding others through therapy, the key is to develop the capacity to recognize in our dialogue which part is speaking and which part is feeling, who is saying what and who is suffering the consequences. Because the moment we can make those distinctions, we open up the possibility for genuine inner healing. Not just behavioral change, not just coping, but healing, where the child feels loved, the critics are contained, and the nurturing parent becomes a real, trustworthy, and consistent presence within. I call this healing the filial psyche, redefining, reframing, and healing this psychic triad, which will be unique for each client. That's where the real transformation begins. If you'd like help healing your filial psyche, visit my website and book a free discovery call, and let's see what's possible.